Welcome to our deep dive today. We're diving into the world of Cleopatra, a figure who has, captivated imaginations for centuries. We're going to try to peel back the layers of myth and really explore her political genius. And hopefully you'll see why she was much more than just a pretty face, especially in such a tumultuous era.
Yeah, and that's precisely what is so captivating about Cleopatra. She's often reduced to just like the romantic entanglements with these powerful Romans, but her story is one of incredible political maneuvering, especially amidst, a declining Ptolemaic dynasty and the rise of the Roman Empire.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We've got some really fascinating primary sources here, and they paint a picture of a woman who is just navigating a world of intense power struggles.
And those power struggles began right at home. With her own family. The Ptolemies, they were notorious for their, shall we say, pragmatic ways of dealing with succession and rivalry.
Yeah, dramatic is putting it mildly. Cleopatra's own father, Ptolemy XII, he bribed his way onto the throne. Can you even imagine the pressure of inheriting that kind of legacy?
It set a dangerous precedent. It established a pattern of reliance on Rome that would ultimately shape Cleopatra's reign. Imagine constantly needing to appease this foreign power while also trying to maintain control over your own people.
It's a tightrope walk, for sure. And speaking of being prepared, Cleopatra's education was extraordinary, especially for a woman of her time. It's like she was training to be a ruler from day one.
Absolutely. Fluent in multiple languages, a student of philosophy, rhetoric, even math and astronomy, her education was a key element of her political strategy. It really equipped her to engage with Roman leaders on an intellectual level, something that they probably didn't expect from a female ruler.
So she understood that knowledge was power, especially when dealing with the Romans. And then there's this whole legendary story of her meeting Caesar, the whole sneaking into the palace rolled up in a rug thing.
Well, what's interesting about that anecdote is that while it makes for a great story, it comes from sources written much later. Caesar himself never even mentions it. It makes you wonder how these narratives evolve and solidify over time.
It's a good reminder to be critical of our sources. So let's look at the situation Caesar was actually in. He was outnumbered. He was facing a rebellion in Alexandria, a very vulnerable position.
Exactly. And Cleopatra saw an opportunity. Providing him with support, resources, and even troops was a strategic masterstroke. It secured Caesar's position and, in turn, hers as well.
This wasn't just a love story, as it's so often portrayed. It was a strategic alliance that helped to solidify her position and ultimately change the course of Egyptian history.
Precisely. It demonstrates her ability to assess a situation and make these bold moves to secure her own power, all while navigating these really complex dynamics of Roman influence.
It really highlights how she was playing the game on multiple levels, right? Like using military strategy, political maneuvering, and even personal charm to solidify her position. But it wasn't all about brute force and alliances. Cleopatra was also a master of using symbolism and spectacle to bolster her image and her authority.
Oh, absolutely. Her connection to the goddess Isis was a powerful move. By aligning herself with Isis, she wasn't just a queen, she was like this divine figure, a living embodiment of one of Egypt's most revered goddesses.
Can you imagine how that played with the Egyptian people?
Yeah.
It's a brilliant way to solidify your legitimacy, especially when you're a woman ruling in a traditionally patriarchal society.
Exactly. It demonstrated a deep understanding of Egyptian culture and religion, and it allowed her to tap into this wellspring of popular support. And remember, she was also dealing with the Alexandrians, who had their own distinct Greek heritage. Cleopatra needed to bridge those cultural divides.
She was juggling so many different factions and interests. It's amazing how she managed to keep everything afloat for as long as she did.
And let's not forget her grand entrance into Tarsus to meet Mark Antony. Arriving on this lavish barge, dressed as Aphrodite, it was pure spectacle, designed to awe and impress.
It's like something out of a Hollywood movie. That image of her sailing down the river, surrounded by opulence, it's legendary. It cemented her image as this powerful and alluring figure.
Cleopatra understood the power of perception. She was a master of creating these grand narratives that reinforced her authority and captivated the imagination of those around her.
But it wasn't just about smoke and mirrors, though. She was also a shrewd negotiator, right?
Yeah.
She managed to secure some pretty favorable deals for Egypt from both Caesar and Antony.
She knew how to leverage her assets. Egypt was the breadbasket of the Roman world, and she used that to her advantage, ensuring that her kingdom remained a vital resource and partner for Rome, not just a conquered territory.
So she was playing the long game,
Yeah.
maintaining Egypt's independence, securing its economic stability, ensuring that her people prospered.
She also wasn't afraid to make tough decisions. Going to war against her own brother, fleeing Alexandria when the situation became untenable. She was a risk taker. She understood that sometimes you have to make bold moves to survive.
It's almost like she was constantly assessing the situation, looking for opportunities, and adapting her strategy as needed. Not just reacting to events, but trying to shape them.
And let's not underestimate her personal charm and intelligence. The sources describe her as witty, charming, and fluent in multiple languages. She knew how to connect with people to win them over to her side.
It makes you wonder what it would have been like to be in a room with her, to witness her political maneuvering firsthand.
I think it's important to remember that she was doing all of this in a world where women were largely relegated to the domestic sphere.
She was breaking all the rules, leading armies, negotiating treaties, shaping the destiny of her nation. She was a true trailblazer.
Yeah. Her very existence challenged the gender norms of her time. She refused to be confined by the limitations placed on women. And she paved the way for other female leaders who would follow in her footsteps.
And then, of course, there's the final chapter of her story, the Battle of Actium, the loss of Antony, and the looming threat of Octavian.
This is where the propaganda machine really kicks into gear. Octavian needed to discredit Antony. And he did so by portraying Cleopatra as this manipulative seductress who had bewitched Antony and led him astray.
It's fascinating how history is often written by the victors. Cleopatra becomes this villain, this symbol of the decadent East, while Octavian is hailed as the savior of Rome.
And that narrative has had a lasting impact on how we view Cleopatra. She's often reduced to this one-dimensional figure, a femme fatale who brought down an empire.
But when you look at her actions, her strategic thinking, her political maneuvering, it's clear that she was so much more than that. She was this complex and brilliant leader who was operating in an incredibly challenging environment.
And even in defeat, she chose to die on her own terms, taking her own life rather than being paraded through the streets of Rome as a captive.
It was a final act of defiance, a way of preserving her dignity and controlling the narrative of her death, even if it was a tragic one. It made me wonder about the sources that we're relying on. We've got excerpts from Stacy Schiff's biography and some ancient texts, but do you think these accounts paint a fair and accurate portrait of Cleopatra?
Well, it's tricky because even historical accounts are shaped by the biases and perspectives of the authors. Plutarch, for example, was writing under Roman rule, so his view of Cleopatra is inevitably colored by the prevailing Roman narrative.
So how do we, centuries later, try to get at the truth? How do we separate the myth from the reality?
We have to be critical readers of history. Consider the context, the motivations of the authors, and look for corroborating evidence. And even then, we may never have the complete picture.
It's like piecing together a puzzle with some of the pieces missing. But that's part of what makes history so fascinating. It's an ongoing process of discovery and interpretation.
And I think it's essential to acknowledge that when it comes to powerful women in history, their stories are often distorted or minimized.
You're right. Throughout this whole deep dive, we've encountered so many descriptions of Cleopatra that focus on her beauty and her supposed powers of seduction. It's as if her accomplishments are somehow diminished because she was also a beautiful and charismatic woman.
Exactly. It's a way of undermining her political genius. By attributing her success to her physical attributes or her ability to manipulate men, rather than to her intellect and strategic skills.
It's frustrating because it perpetuates these harmful stereotypes about women in power. It's like they can't fathom that a woman could be both beautiful and brilliant, that she could achieve power through her own merits rather than through manipulation or seduction.
We need to move beyond those simplistic narratives and recognize Cleopatra for what she was, a remarkable leader who navigated a complex and treacherous political landscape with incredible skill and intelligence.
So as we move towards our final thoughts, I think it's important to keep that context in mind. Cleopatra's story isn't just about the past. It's about understanding the enduring dynamics of power, gender, and how history is shaped and interpreted. So we've talked about, Cleopatra's family, all that drama, her education, those strategic alliances, her use of spectacle and symbolism. But knowing all of that, how should we really assess her leadership, within the context of Roman power? Was she fighting a losing battle right from the start?
I think that's a question historians are still grappling with. On the one hand, Rome's expansion was this force very few could withstand, but Cleopatra managed to maintain Egypt's independence for decades, which is really a testament to her political savvy.
Yeah, she secured a period of stability and prosperity for her people. I mean, that's no small feat given the circumstances. It's like she was playing chess against this grandmaster, knowing the odds were stacked against her.
But within those limitations, she found ways to maneuver, to carve out a space for her own agency and power. She played the hand she was dealt, with incredible skill and determination.
It makes you think about the nature of leadership itself. Like, what does it mean to be a successful leader when you're facing these, seemingly impossible obstacles?
Well, Cleopatra's story suggests that true leadership isn't always about winning outright. It's about navigating these complex situations, making strategic choices, and leaving a lasting impact even in the face of defeat.
And her story has resonated for centuries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, inspiring countless works of art and literature and film. Why do you think she continues to fascinate us?
Well, I think part of it is the mystery and intrigue that surrounds her, but it also speaks to a deeper desire to understand how individuals can shape history, even when the forces against them seem so overwhelming.
Yeah. Cleopatra's story is a reminder that human agency really does matter. That even within these systems of power, individuals can make choices that have a profound impact.
And her life underscores the importance of challenging those narratives that have been passed down to us. We need to be willing to look beyond the stereotypes and the really simplistic interpretations to understand the complexity of figures like Cleopatra.
It's about reclaiming the stories of those who have been marginalized or misrepresented and recognizing their contributions to the world.
And ultimately, I think Cleopatra's story invites us to consider our own roles in shaping the course of history. What choices are we making? What impact are we having on the world around us?
It's a call to action, to be more critical thinkers, to challenge the status quo, and use our own voices to create a more just and equitable world.
Because history is not just a collection of stories from the past. It's a living, breathing entity that shapes our present and our future. And it's up to us to make sure that those stories are told accurately and with integrity.
That's a really thought-provoking note to end on. We've journeyed through Cleopatra's world, uncovering her political genius and challenging some long-held assumptions. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to keep exploring her story and to question the narratives that shape our understanding of the past. Thanks for joining us.